morning. Well, first of all, I came up in the activation and the experiential business where the cardinal rule was plan the work and then work the plan. So the last thing I do on a Friday afternoon is put together the list of the first things I want to do on a Monday morning. Typically, that involves reaching out to people in my network, and this is pre-pandemic as well. I try to start every day just reaching out to people, whether it's their birthday, work anniversary, see an article that I think might be of interest to them, and just try to reach out to 4 or 5 people in my network just to say hey and how you doing. Then I'll get into the work of my business, which involves consulting to brands and sports rights holders, properties, teams, leagues, and so forth, in whatever they have going on. And then during the academic year, I'm an adjunct professor at University of or St. John's University. Sorry, that's my assistant, Princess, who's here in the office with me today. But I typically teach on Monday nights, so Mondays, a good part of my Monday is spent going through my lecture notes. If I've got to do any last-minute grading or preparation for the class, and then typically Monday afternoons are spent in the classroom. Now it's a virtual classroom, but usually I'm on campus on Monday afternoon, meeting with students, and then giving my lecture late in the day on Monday, and then shutting it down when I get home from class.
Yeah, you obviously have the ultimate man cave / office right there.
It's when you've been in the sports business long enough, you tend to collect a lot of things, and when you have the hoarder gene, hopefully remaining recessive, you tend to keep those things. So yeah, I've got a lot of cool stuff in the basement. Reminds me of where I came from.
I think I think a lot of us Irishmen have that hoarder dream. We can't help it. It came from our mothers. It came from our mothers. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Whether we're children or grandchildren of the Depression, right?
Right.
We'll throw that out. We may need it at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy.
Well, let me introduce you. That's Tim McGhee over there. This is Rob Thompson with Game Plan U today, and Tim is a career sports marketer from IMG PS, the legendary PSP agency. Controlled and managed $100 million, I would say, budget from sponsorships for AT&T for many years with the NCAA, Yankees, Cowboys. So the list goes on, and then you've been a free agent now for 6 or so years, just a sports marketing strategic consultant. And how is all of this affecting your world right now, as it is for everybody, but how have you been able to deal with it, with the challenges?
Well, Rob, first of all, thank you very much for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I'm flattered, and I look forward to our conversation. But like everybody in the sports industry, I've been impacted by this, some more so than others, but we've all been impacted because this is, it is not a stretch to call this a global crisis. So most of my business has dried up. My hope and my optimism is that's a temporary condition. As we were speaking about earlier, I truly believe that sports is going to play an outsized role in our return to normalcy. I think we're on the backside of this crisis. That's not to say it's going to end any day soon, but we are certainly going to be coming out of it. And I believe that sports is going to play a tremendous role in getting people connected in meaningful ways. At first, that's not going to be in the arena or in the stadium or on the course or in the tennis courts, but I think virtually and digitally we are going to be connecting with each other. I would not be surprised in the next 2 weeks or so if we start hearing some real concrete plans from the major sports properties here in the U.S. on how they're going to get back into business. I think from a psychological standpoint, that's going to have a tremendous impact on our collective psyche, and I'm really looking forward to that. There's that old joke where the guy says, I love getting up every day. And somebody asks him why, and he says, well, because I get better looking every day. And that's sort of how I look forward to my Mondays now. Every week we're going to get more and more good news coming out of this, and I'm very confident of that. So right now, business is way off. So the good news is, if anybody has any opportunities for me, I got plenty of bandwidth to help them. But the day is going to dawn again where we're going to have sports, and my hope is that I'm going to be a resource that people are going to tap into again, as they have for the last, as you said, the last 6 or 8 years as I've been out on my own.
What do you think is, and you touched on it, so this whole digital disruption, what do you see teams and leagues and brands now leading in and really paying attention to how to create a fan experience from home? What?
Well, I think it's a two-sided coin, right? The first thing is these the crass commercial reality is these properties uh, are going to have to make up a tremendous amount of value for their partners, whether it's their media partners or their sponsors. And the best way to do that is by connecting them to their fans. From the fans' perspective, I think properties have been doing a better job of connecting them through content, through digital platforms, social media, and so forth. And that's going to continue. I think you're going to have to think a little bit more broadly in what's exclusive and what's something that you might want to, for lack of a better term, give away. You're not truly giving it away because you are going to monetize it and measure it. But in the long run, I think that's going to strengthen those connections with fans, which in turn is going to go back and provide more value to the sponsors and the media partners. But whether it's through social, whether it's through exclusive content, whether it's through adding new camera angles, whether it's providing fans the opportunity to sort of direct the show a little bit more before, during, and post game, those are the types of things that properties and their media rights holders are really going to have to look at until we get fans back in the stands.
Do you see brands challenging then the property and the rights holders to figure out how to drive traffic or consumer, interactions or transactions from sitting at home and using the cell phone, or is it still based upon driving traffic to retail is going to be challenging?
It's going to be challenging, I think, because if you look at the challenges that many brands and many industries are facing, and some, quite honestly, have done very well through this. Consumer packaged goods have done well, certain areas of retail have done well, but by and large, most industries have taken a hit. So sponsorships and sports is only a small part of their overall business, and even of their overall marketing mix. So they're going to have to balance the need to market their products with managing their expenses until demand picks back up. So there's going to be a lot of tough conversations between brands and properties over the coming months and even years about restructuring deals, the value that brands put on sponsorships versus the value that the properties put on the assets they're offering, and so those are going to be tough conversations. And for the last decade, maybe decade and a half, properties and brands have done a really good job of talking about the idea of partnerships. Sometimes it's been lip service, and sometimes it's truly been a reflection of the relationship between brands and properties. But no more, never so much in the past is it going to be important for this truly to be a collaborative effort between properties and brands to recreate or refocus or reallocate these sponsorship assets for the best interests of both parties. It's the only way that both sides are going to survive and come out of this stronger in the end.
When you were on the other side of the table, and you've been on both sides, right, from the sales side of it and property representation side to the brand side, and what did you learn even before that? Obviously before this, but working with AT&T, having that big of a budget, for you, how did brands look at it? Did they look at it from that perspective of visibility, brand awareness, or was it truly about driving the bottom line based upon the ROI in those sponsorships?
I think we were ahead of the curve going back to my days at Singular Wireless before it was acquired by AT&T, and certainly as we were acquired by AT&T and I was put in charge of that combined group. We always looked at ROI. The question that I was asked more often by the CMO than any other one was, if I give you another dollar, Tell me why I need to spend it on sponsorships and not some other form of marketing. So I think we within Singular and later at AT&T, as well as our agency partners, did a pretty good job of doing that. We were also in a very fortunate position in that industry in mobile, because it was one. I used to kid that it was one of two sponsors that truly impacted the fans' experience at a game. It was us as a mobility company and the handset device, and Budweiser, the beer, and we impacted the fan experience in very different ways. Um, but at Singular and AT&T, what we wanted to do was we wanted to be part of that fan's experience from the moment they left their house to the moment they walked back in. And that took the form of, things that were directly related to the sponsorship, like content related to starting lineups or injury reports or video content, to things that weren't directly related, like, apps to help them, navigate their way to the stadium and home, um, and things like that. So from our perspective, yeah, it was about branding, but we had 98% brand awareness, 99% brand awareness at AT&T. So it wasn't so much about that. It was more about creating those ongoing relationships with the consumer, and delivering something that our competitors couldn't, so that we as a company were more sticky. Um, and people were more likely to recommend us, more likely to ascribe the brand attributes we wanted them to think about, less likely to switch. All those key metrics that we measured on an ongoing basis. That was what was driving our sponsorship um, activities. And
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 now
and
that
I'm sorry, go
no,
please.
no, go ahead, finish your
No, I
thought.
was going to say, and that's something that I take to all of my client engagements is, what are you doing for the consumer? Because at the end of the day, you strip away everything that a sponsor gets from a sponsorship, and it really comes down to one thing: it's borrowing the equity from the property to be able to bask in that halo effect, so that consumers are going to think more favorably of you, and ultimately, consider, try, and use, and ultimately, hopefully, become loyal to your product or service.
So what are you seeing now in with sponsors? And I know they've been a little hesitant, but what do you see them doing in the esports space? And what do you see sponsors then doing in this space right here, podcast and new media?
Well, two things. In esports, I think esports has benefited tremendously from this pandemic. If you look at the numbers of people on Twitch and some of the other platforms, um, there's been such an incredible rise in the number of viewerships and the depth of the engagement. So I think brands were embracing esports for the last 2 years or so. They are certainly going in hard with this. As a matter of fact, shortly after we finish up at this podcast, I've got a meeting with one of the major platforms to discuss exactly what we're talking about right now, which is how to broaden their appeal to brands. I think that what esports and the platforms that distribute esports content are going to have to do is make sure that they continue to deliver as stadiums and arenas and traditional sports come back online. And I think they're gonna be able to do that. I'm extremely bullish on esports going forward. In terms of podcasts, I mean, you look at the number of you look at the numbers in terms of listenership on podcasts and viewers of video series like this, and they're through the roof. The challenge that the brands are going to face is selecting the right ones, right? Because we're in that. If you remember that book around 15 years or so ago, The Long Tail, where it sort of foresaw the incredible explosion of narrowcasting. I think they were looking at that more on the online side, as opposed to just more broadly on mobile and through podcasts and things. But there's a tremendous long tail, so brands are going to have to find those either those particular outlets that provide a critical mass of viewership or listenership, or they're going to have to be very strategic in finding a number of outlets to partner with in order to reach a critical mass to make sure that it's worth their efforts to go. But I think podcasts are great. I think I think there's something for everybody. It's the true definition of narrowcasting.
Well, that last question was just for me personally, so I could care less what anybody else wanted to hear. Well, I appreciate that. No, I definitely see it. I've used podcasting for a way to get my story out there in an authentic way to provide value for people when, the things that everybody are talking about now, these are things that I landed on 5 years ago, thank goodness, and really just a door opener, in many ways. And it's developed into something that has been able to scale, my reach and my net, I guess. But
Yeah, and then being, you've been involved for 5 years. I mean, that's incredibly sort of prescient on your part because the number of podcasts, if you looked 5 years ago, was probably, infinitesimal compared to where it is today.
Yeah.
So you've had a 5-year head start in terms of growing your brand and building your voice and your authenticity and your, and your position within the marketplace. So kudos to you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was desperation at the time.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah. Desperation is the mother of invention. That's, so.
Well, exactly. And now look at this. I mean, what's your point of view on the whole recalibration of everything? And what do you see as you sit in that ultimate man cave, which, by the way, you're leading the league right there. So
Thanks.
What do you see happening from, the leagues, possibly no fall NFL or college sports or college football? I mean, these are all realities for us. And I know you don't have that crystal ball, but what is your instinct telling you how this whole recalibration is going to kind of, fall into line?
I'm very bullish on the NFL coming back. I think, when you look at a $20 billion business, I think if anybody has the ability to test, trace, and treat, excuse me, which are sort of the 3 T's of getting back to normal, it's the NFL, right? So they will do everything in their power to put a product on the field. Whether or not there's fans in the stands is sort of secondary, and my sense is there probably won't be. Maybe in some markets there might be if there's widespread testing and tracing at that point. But by and large, I think it's as close to a necessary luxury as you can have, I guess is the best way to put it. College football, I think, is going to be tougher because, virtually every college athletic program, not just football programs, but athletic programs are running deficits, right? You have your Ohio States and your Texas and some of those other schools that will run a surplus, but the cost implications of having a season without fans is going to make it a much more difficult decision on the collegiate side than on the professional side, in my opinion. As you said, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think we'll see NFL. I think we'll see Major League Baseball. The other sports I don't know about. But again, I'm optimistic. My hope is that within the next week or two, we'll really start to hear about great advances in the number of people who are being tested every day, both for the virus and for the antibodies. And just as we see sort of a spike in the number of cases, hopefully we'll start to see a spike in the amount and number of items of good news that we're getting. But I've always been optimistic by nature, so that's just me.
Yeah, well, what else is there, right? No one likes a naysayer, that's for sure.
Right, it's like that story. I was that kid when I woke up on Christmas morning and opened a box, and there was a big thing of horse manure in there, and most kids would get upset, and I got excited because I figured if there was horse manure in the box, there had to be a pony around there somewhere.
I love that one. Yeah, well, I don't even know where to go with that one. That was fit. So let me wrap it up with this one, and this is, I think you're just going to be able to give us some gold. I do have a lot of young professionals who are coming out of college that watch this show that are looking for advice on their career. And I always say one thing: it's one thing to get a job in sports; it's another thing to have a career in sports. Too much different paths, and if you're thinking short term. What advice do you give those young professionals or even those startups that are trying to come into the marketplace now, dealing with everything that's happening in the world, but also trying to cut through the clutter and make a name for themselves?
Well, I think, No, I think it starts very early in your collegiate career, right? It used to be that, maybe you got a summer internship between your junior and senior year, and then at the, if you had a school that had a good career services office, they would help you send out resumes or companies would come on campus. That's all changed in the last 20 years. I think it really gets down to creating opportunities for yourself and finding those internships very early. And they could even be as early as between high school and college. And I'm not saying that you're going to, get a job between your high school year and senior year in high school and your first year of college. And certainly not this summer. It's going to be very difficult. But in general, start very early to try to create a resume that makes you stand out. If you get involved with a local golf tournament, well, by you know, being a volunteer, well, guess what? You've got job experience to put on your resume in sports. When you start to build on that and get real internships and take coursework that you can speak about, you're building your resume. That's number one. Number two, network, network, network. Meet people in the industry. I think the sports industry is really, really good about paying it forward to the next generation of sports marketers and sports managers. And if you meet people in the industry, by and large, they're going to be willing to give you their time and talk about their experiences. So grow your network. And number three, if you really want to be in sports and you have a passion for it, you have to pursue it to the virtual exclusion of everything else. And what I mean by the virtual exclusion is, yeah, when you come out of school, yeah, there's economic realities. You may have to pay back loans. You may not be able to move back in with your parents. You have bills to pay and so forth. But don't let anybody tell you that you can't find a job in sports. If you have a passion for it, you will find something. And then last but not least, have a goal in mind. Have an ultimate job of what you want to do and where you want to go. And you may not have that when you come out of school. You may not even have it after your first job. But once you figure out what it is, again, develop a career path that will allow you to reach that goal ultimately. Um, and in that case, you got to be a little flexible, right? If your goal is to be a general manager of a Major League Baseball team, well, there's only 30 of those jobs in the world. So it's going to be very tough for you to achieve that particular goal. But you could be a GM of a minor league team. You could be the GM of another sport. You could be an assistant GM. As you go along, you may find that your passion is in facilities or ticket sales or event operations, whatever it is. So be flexible, but be passionate and pursue those goals. And I think if you do that, you'll be much happier than if you just have a job. So
Yeah, there's a
that's my advice.
and find some good mentors along the way, right?
That's good. I had some people that were very kind to me very early in my career, and I learned very early that I wasn't going to be able to pay them back in any meaningful way. They were more successful than I could ever hope to be. So I decided then very early to pay it forward. And that's something I try to do throughout my career. But yeah, good mentors are like gold in your career.
No doubt. How do people get a hold of you, Tim?
They can reach me at tim.mcghee, McGhee, at mspsports.com. Look for me on LinkedIn as well. I welcome new connections.
Wonderful. Listen, thanks for connecting with us this morning, and best wishes on everything. Let's definitely stay in touch. I'm glad we were able to spend this time together on a Monday.
Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate it. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk soon.
Fantastic. That's Tim over there, over there, over there. I'm Rob here. Take care, everybody. Be safe.
Have a good day, everyone.